هيو الحلو هيو الله كريم.
Hi, I'm Ashira Ramadan from Jerusalem.
I'm Berlanti Azam. I'm living in Gaza.
Hi, I'm Ala from Jerusalem.
Hi, I'm Ram. How are you?
Yeah, hi Ashira, how are you?
Thank you for taking the time to see us today.
We're glad to be here.
To learn about your work.
Yeah.
So, what have you been up to since you got here?
We arrived here on March 6th in the afternoon at Ben Gurion Airport, and it's been very busy ever since then. We immediately went to an interview with one of the print papers here in the area, and we were glad to do that because we're glad that people here within Israel are paying attention to the case and think it's important. But then we went directly to Haifa, and we were in Haifa until the 24th, Wednesday the 24th, and there were numerous court dates during that time. So our time was really spent, just getting ready each day to go to the court and being in the court, listening very carefully to what we were hearing and responding to what we were hearing. We would come back after each court day and just write what was most important to us and try to get that. We have a website, the Rachel Corrie Foundation website, so we try to provide some information there to people who are interested in what's happening. And it was very exhausting, emotionally, and physically too. But we had good friends, people in Haifa, some that we've met before, that we were able to spend some time with too. So really fortunately there were a couple of days in between most of the court days, so we had a chance to go to court and then relax a little bit and respond.
Are we gonna get something to drink, or seems like
Yes.
I
loved Rachel.
So I guess they already know you.
No, I asked them. They look like Rachel's parents. Your daughter is an honor.
Thank you.
God bless her soul.
Shukran.
Ladies first.
Shukran.
You're welcome.
Smells so good.
Thank you.
We love Arabic coffee.
So this isn't the first time, of course, for you to arrive here, right? This is number one.
We've been to Israel and the West Bank 4 times, and we've also been to Gaza 4 times. So some of those are the same trip, but
Some are different.
Enjoy.
some are different.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Shukran.
أنا عملت سكر قليل.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I inhaled a bit of gas and it's not going.
Oh, we
So
were.
there's a story behind that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We covered a little bit of the Na'aleen protests and what's been happening in Jerusalem.
Yeah. Yesterday was that.
It
It was last week, and it doesn't seem
Oh,
to
really?
be. Yeah,
Yeah.
my body doesn't seem to be getting over it. So,
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. We follow what's happening at the protest, of course, and are heartened by how people keep going out, week after week. And Belaine, we were there some years ago, and we know Muhammad Khatib and different people that are involved there. So we're just, we think their nonviolent resistance is so very important, and was to Rachel, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's clear when you come here that the Palestinian people aren't going anywhere. The bravery, the determination. I think particularly the people we meet, adult after adult after adult, that is really working hard. I think sometimes when I'm in Gaza, I think they're just pushing the concrete of the occupation and the attack back from their children, and trying to protect these children and give them a little space there to grow up to have some childhood and to grow up to be productive adults. And it's beyond me why everybody in the world doesn't support these people to try to give a future to their children. That's our future too. That's the future my grandchildren have to live with, and they would love to do it with the children that are in Gaza. You know, Rachel was killed standing in front of a wall that had children behind it, and we see those children grow up. And so the oldest just told us last year that he switched his college major to English. You know, and he's pursuing English, but he's never been outside it. I don't think he's ever been more than a few hundred feet outside of the Gaza Strip. He may have, but
In Egypt.
yeah, I think he probably went into Egypt when the wall came down once and had a fish dinner or something just that small. And the little girl that we met the first time we were there, almost 7 years ago, and she had a pet rabbit. Their home still was standing at the time we were there, and their bedroom, the children's bedroom, was being shot by the Israeli Defense Force. Bullets were going through there every night, so the family would sleep in the parents' bedroom back in the back of the house. And Rachel wrote about that, and it was waking up in a puddle of blankets for these children, that she was sleeping there with them. But little Iman was, she had a pet
Bunny.
a bunny, yeah, a rabbit, and she would pet that, and that was the adults bought that bunny so that the children would have something soft and cuddly. And now she's 13 or 14 years old, and she wants to come to New York City. She's on other things. So, so when we come here, we see that determination, that love for their children, and a dedication among our friends to nonviolent resistance, but resistance. And it's heartwarming. And we need all of us around the world. Our job then is to make the world see what's going on there, and to react with horror to the horrible things that are happening.
Did you feel this way before Rachel came here, or has what happened with Rachel and her coming here and the letters that she sent you kind of make you even more aware of what's happening and get you more involved into it?
I've always wanted to know, how did you feel when you first heard the news that Rachel wants to come to Gaza?
Yeah, we were very removed from everything that was happening here. And I think we're typical of many Americans who don't have a direct connection to this. I think there were a lot of visions in the area that we have because, associated with different religions and so forth. And but as far as real factual knowledge about what was happening, we didn't have that. And we also, I think, just weren't paying very much attention, because all my life I've known about some of the problems, but so little. And then our images were so limited that we were getting through the media at that time. I actually think it's some better now in the U.S., but I feel like all the time I was growing up and while my children were growing up, the images of Palestinians were very, very negative and, just very biased. And so that's what I knew. And we were very sympathetic to the Israeli narrative. I read to the children of stories of children who survived the Holocaust and some who didn't. And so that's where our sympathy was at the time, but really not based on knowledge, So Rachel brought us to the issue. She became really interested in it when she was studying at the Evergreen State College, but also after 9/11 in the United States, people started questioning what's causing all of this, why, and that took her to this area and to this conflict. She made connections on her campus with people who had been here before. One was an Israeli woman whose parents had survived the Holocaust, and then she had been in the Israeli army. But then after Lebanon, I think after the first war in Lebanon, she started to question what was happening, and she became a founder of Women in Black and opposing the occupation, and she strongly opposes the occupation now. But Rachel connected with her and with other people who had spent time here before. So she really started educating herself and studying Arabic, and then told us, that she was thinking about coming here. And it was a bit, startling and worrisome to us, but she was 23 at the time, and it was very important to her to be active in the world and to be connected to the world. She had had some trips before, one to Russia, and she'd done a bit of traveling in other places, and she needed, as a young person, to get out and be connected to what was happening. So I knew it was really important. I think we all hoped that maybe she'd find something to do that was less threatening, because little closer to home and less threatening. But we didn't try to discourage her. I didn't, at least, and my family sort of looked to me I had more time, but to talk with Rachel about what she was doing, and I knew she was preparing. That she was learning a lot, that she was thinking about it carefully. She didn't just one day get up and come over here. So I felt like she talked to a lot of people before she came. She connected with people who were here before she came. She did a lot of reading, and she was working on the language, and like a lot of people,
And when you heard the stories, like coming from Gaza, when she got to Gaza and everything, how did that feel, getting the letters?
It's the letters mostly went to Cindy, and then as I tease her, I'd read them later. Cindy talked to me, but for one, I was in the U.S. military in Vietnam, and so I had this picture that Israel wants to present to the rest of the world of this just army and and some sort of restraint on their part. So I thought, well, Rachel could be in an area they didn't want her and protesting, and I now know that's exactly where she should be, but she could be arrested. She's a tall, skinny girl. She could be arrested. When she got there, and I start reading what she's reporting and know how honest and thorough Rachel's reporting would be, what she's writing to us, and she's writing about bullet holes around the windows of a house that has children inside. Then I became frightened, because I realized that military there had no discipline, with no control on it, and so that's a different sort of thing. And I could talk to Rachel on the telephone, but I couldn't write to her, because it was hard for me, not absolutely knowing she was okay at that moment of trying to communicate to her was very difficult. I don't know how Cindy did it for 11 months while I was in Vietnam. I wrote one email, which she answered, and that actually answering my email was the last communication we had for her before she was killed. And she talked about not feeling particularly at risk and asking me what she should do for the rest of her life. This very optimistic email, and talked about how hard it would be to leave.
The people,
which is the other worry I had for her, is I knew it was hard for, from the other side, from a military person, the friendships we made with other people in the army, that's a strong bond, but I knew to do that with families, and for Rachel and with the children who could not leave, that would be so much more strong. and how Rachel would feel about that. I just knew she wrote about it. She had to leave in a way she could come back was her plan, that she needed to be able to, she would never be able to completely leave these people. And she hasn't.
She wanted to make a commitment. She said commitments to places were very important to her. So in some ways, we feel we've, continued her commitment to the people in Gaza, but to all the people really in the region by continuing to work on it. And we visited the house, where she stood, because it wasn't demolished right away. It was demolished later. Later that year, it was made unlivable and then completely demolished in 2004. But we visited the house, and I don't think people understand. There were two families inside, and on the front, the part facing the border where the Israeli military operated was completely covered with bullet holes. They would shoot into the house in the night. And part of the family came to the United States and traveled with Craig and me. The Israeli government had nothing against this family. They were clearing all the houses in that area. And Khalid Nasrallah told people in the U.S. how he would go out with something like, we call it spackle, but like a white covering to cover up the holes in the walls, because they hoped that maybe when the soldiers were driving by, if they didn't see all those holes in the house, they might not shoot into the house. They might not use it, kind of to play with. I just, for us, the whole situation has become very personal because we know all these people. We have a lot of friends. So every time something's happening in Gaza, we're very concerned.
And how did it feel to get the news that what's happened to Rachel?
That, of course, was that was the worst moment of our lives. And
who gave you? How did you find out?
Our daughter Sarah was living on the west coast of the United States in our home, and we were living on the east coast for a few years. And a friend of ours telephoned our daughter Sarah early on Sunday morning, and Sarah let the message machine pick it up so she could hear the voice, but it was being recorded. And this friend said, "I just heard about the tragedy on television. I'm so sorry, let me know if there's anything I could do." And Sarah thought, what tragedy? What's she talking about? And then she thought, well, if it's on the television, it has to be Rachel. So they turned on the television, and scrolling at the bottom it said, Olympian woman killed in the Gaza Strip. And then they wondered, well, Sarah wondered, why didn't my parents tell me? And then she said, well, because they don't know. So she called us, actually her husband called us, because she couldn't dial the phone, and she got a hold of Cindy. We were living in an apartment there. I was out washing clothes at the laundry in the complex. Cindy picked up the phone, and our son-in-law said, I asked for me, and Cindy said, well, what is it, Kelly? He's not here. And then she could hear Sarah sobbing in the background. And so
then Sarah said, "It's Rachel." And my first question, I think, because I just needed to get the worst possibility out of the way, I said, "Is she dead?" Because I could tell from their voices and that something was very bad. And Sarah said, "We think so." And then while Sarah, I carried the telephone to where Craig was. We were living in North Carolina at the time, so he was doing the laundry in this apartment complex. I carried the phone and was talking to Sarah, and then Kelly, my son-in-law, went to the television, and by that time across the bottom it said Rachel Corrie, Olympia, Washington, killed in the Gaza Strip. And for a moment before that happened, both Sarah and I was thinking, is there any other woman from Olympia in Gaza? It's a human but selfish reaction, because I wished it wasn't her, and so and now, whenever I hear about this happening, something like this happening to anybody here, and it happens so much, I'm always reminded of that really horrible moment, and I have a sense about the terrible it's just such a terrible feeling when you get that kind of news. So, and so many people, sadly, so many people here have those kinds of experiences. So, yeah. And then we just had to go from one moment to the next. If you had told me, 10 or 15 years ago that we would be here and that we would be doing this and that we would have experienced what we did, that we would have lost Rachel in such a way, I would have told you that I wouldn't have even taken another breath. How could I even take another breath after that? But that day, then we called our son in Washington, D.C., and he got us tickets to come to Washington, D.C. We thought we would come here. We thought we would go to Gaza and bring Rachel's body back home, but we were told very quickly that we wouldn't be able to come here because the war with Iraq, everybody knew it was about to start, and it did just a few days later. So as it turned out, we were in Washington, D.C. because that's where our son lived, and we needed help. So Rachel's congressman, he's now our congressman, was helping us, and so, kind of when something like this happens, you're in shock, but you just take the next step. So by the end of that day, we got on an airplane in Charlotte, North Carolina, and flew. Craig, I sometimes tell that we threw some things into a suitcase, that we needed, but when he got to Washington, D.C., he saw that instead of a white shirt, he had thrown pillowcases, the pillow covers into the suitcase, because you're just, you're kind of just somehow functioning, but not very well. Yeah.
Did you see the footage? Did you understand what happened? How did that process take place?
Well, shortly after we heard that Rachel was killed, I got a call from one of Rachel's friends here, and so he described what he saw, and there's no real footage of the moment Rachel was killed. We know of no video camera that did that. There was a video camera that the IDF had on the border, but it moves away from watching the bulldozers a few minutes before she's killed and then comes back. So we found out from the eyewitnesses, and then over the years we've read some testimony from the Israeli Defense Force, people that were on the scene. We've seen some of what exists of that video. They will not release all of the video that they have that they've watched to us, and that's very concerning. We've seen things that the Israeli military put out to our Congress and to our family that obviously are not true, and that's a great concern to us. And it takes months, sometimes years, to find out that what they're writing or telling us is not true, and it's very difficult to convince somebody. You can wonder about it. Sometimes we don't have any reason to wonder about it. We just accept it as true, and it turns out it is not true. So that's one of the things out of this lawsuit that we have. Then you have people under oath, and you have a trained attorney, a very good attorney, to ask them, okay, why did you do this? Did you ask about that when you're doing an investigation? And so some of this is really coming out to our country and to the media and to our family.
There was over 6 hours of videotape that day that the IDF took. We've seen that in some documentation that we've gotten. And they've given, our family has, I think, only about 14 and a half minutes of tape that they will give us. And the camera turns for the 5 minutes during the period when Rachel was killed and looks at Egypt and just sits at Egypt, where the rest of those 14 minutes it's been moving around looking at the bulldozers and what the activists and what they're doing. After Rachel is killed, then the camera swings back and looks at the scene. So we would like to be able to see the whole 6 hours of tape and see, do they other times turn the camera and look at Egypt and just sit there and not look at what their equipment is doing and so forth? Or was it unusual that they turned away during that 5 minutes? We're told that the orders changed that day, that when the people in the bulldozers and in the tank. There were 2 bulldozers there that day. There were 2 people in each bulldozer. There was an APC vehicle that I think we've heard in court had 5 people in it. And we know that when they couldn't disperse the activists, when they couldn't get them to move out of the area, that they moved away and they moved to other areas. But they were told by their command not to let the activists interfere with their work. So they were told to go back in, even though the activists were there.
And the Israeli Defense Force, the testimony we've seen that there was, or actually it's an affidavit at this point, we haven't cross-examined those people, but the affidavit says that they were given new orders to go back in and not let the International stop them, and 5 minutes later, Rachel was killed. Well, so the IDF is telling us 5 minutes before Rachel was killed, they received the order. We see this film that has the communication between the tank and the bulldozers and the Tactical Operations Center on that somehow is recorded on the film, all except that order. And for 5 minutes before Rachel's killed, it's looking somewhere else. So you got to think they received the order, they knew, they turned the camera away. I mean, that's what naturally comes to me. But that's the sort of thing we'd like to look up. We see that our Congress and our family, there's a picture that the IDF has used to brief Congress, and it shows this bulldozer facing a mound, and it's very grainy. It's taken from this camera, so you can barely make anything out, but it's got this bulldozer and a mound of earth in front of it, and it says this is where Rachel's body was. Well, if you watch the full film and you look at other pictures, it's clearly not the bulldozer that killed Rachel. It's not where Rachel's body was, and in fact the bulldozer's facing the wrong way. When it was coming, it was going this other way. But they're telling our Congress, see, Rachel couldn't be seen because of this big mound of earth. And if you watch the whole film, it's clearly not true. And if we had a little bit more film, you would be able to see the medics come up and go get her body from some other place. And so we say, we want to see that other film. Show us the remainder of the film.
Do they show you afterwards, after her?
Just a little bit, but not. It cuts off before the ambulance comes, so it's a few minutes.
But it's very, I think, important that we know that that the Israeli government, the Israeli military, has tried to mislead the U.S. government and government officials by showing these photos saying this is where Rachel was, when in fact it wasn't. And it wasn't even the bulldozer, it was the other bulldozer. And just the idea that why would they need to misrepresent it? Why are they showing false information? It raises a lot of questions for us.
So,
yeah.
Is that the reason the case is now in the Israeli courts? What do you expect to?
Well, the position, our family has been seeking the truth and accountability for 7 years. And we started by working with our government, with the U.S. government. Our congressman introduced a resolution into the U.S. Congress called HCR 111 that called for an American investigation with Israeli cooperation in it and so forth. And it got quite a lot of support, but it didn't ever come out of committee because it was in a committee with some very conservative members of the House. And the position of the U.S. government remains that Rachel's case has not been investigated properly here. We have the support of the American government in coming here through the courts to try to get more answers because they've written to us. In fact, it was Colin Powell's chief of staff. When Colin Powell was Secretary of State, his chief of staff sent a letter to us saying that what they had seen, what they had received, did not reflect a thorough, credible, and transparent investigation. That kind of investigation was promised to President Bush by Prime Minister Sharon the day after Rachel was killed, but it never happened. And I think it's an insult to the United States government that that these questions go unanswered, or that they go that our government continues to be misled by what happened. We just learned in court, or we knew some with the documents, but not clearly. But one of the investigators testified in court. He said They didn't go to the scene of the incident. They didn't ask, they say because of security they don't go, but they didn't ask to go in an armored vehicle where they could have gone to see the scene. Craig and I know because we were there in September. There were many IDF vehicles operating on that border, bulldozers and tanks and others. So they felt they could go there. It seems like the investigators could have gotten into an armored vehicle and gone to the scene of the incident. They didn't take the soldiers who were in the bulldozer to that place to ask them questions.
What did you see the drivers of the bulldozers?
No, not yet. Not
We've
yet.
We've
No.
not met them. We've seen some
We don't.
video of them on Israeli TV. I think shortly after this.
And now in the trial, you're in the first part still,
Yes.
where your side shows the eyewitnesses and so on.
Yes.
And you haven't yet heard anything from the defense.
Well,
We're just between our side showing that, and then
And
we've
theirs.
heard, we've yet to hear from their witnesses, although we had, I guess, really two witnesses, which would be sort of for the court, or maybe more likely you would think of them coming from the government side. So we've heard from Yehuda Hiss, Professor Hiss, that did the autopsy, and of course, yeah, and
You
and this.
received a full report of the autopsy?
Well, we did receive some information about the autopsy, and we saw the autopsy report. But for instance, to do the autopsy, our permission was granted, provided there be somebody there from the U.S. Embassy. And it took us several years to find out that nobody was there. He had no permission to do that autopsy because there was no permission without somebody being there. So that's one of the problems. And we were informed by the Israeli military that there was somebody there. So, that's one of the things where we said it takes years. You trust them. We gave the permission. They say there was somebody there. And then we start to find out, we see something we have now requested all the information about Rachel that our government has, and in an email there's something that says, wait a minute, who was there? I don't know that anybody was there, from our embassy to somebody inside. And then we started following, wait a minute, if they don't know somebody's there, was there somebody there? It takes us years.
We now know
And
there
now
was
he just,
no one there.
Professor Hiss just says, no, nobody was there, but I went on with the autopsy.
But the most important thing about that is there was an Israeli court order that said the only way he could do the autopsy was if somebody was present from the American
So already there's-
So this is a
services, consular
violation.
services. Yes, it's a
Yeah.
violation.
Yeah.
And he just said that in court he testified that he just doesn't pay attention kind of to the court orders is kind of what he said.
Well, he said it would
ultimately,
be too busy. He was too busy to go to the court again and change the court order. I mean, the prime minister has said that this would be a thorough, credible, and transparent investigation, and Professor Hiss is too busy to go to the court and change it if he can't get somebody there. It's insane, unbelievable.
But then we're supposed to believe what their reports say. But in the report that of the military police investigation that initially came out, there was a report from the military police investigation. They didn't release it to the United States government, but they did allow us to read it. Craig and I read it in San Francisco at the Israeli consulate, and later some other family members and Craig read it at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. U.S. officials at the American embassy in Tel Aviv, a couple were able to go and read the report, and some from the State Department. In that report, they said that somebody from the American embassy was present at the autopsy, so it's a lie. And they also finally released conclusions to that report publicly, and they also state there that somebody from the American embassy was at the autopsy. It's completely false. So, there's a very obvious, there's no credibility with it at all. And then we've learned, which is disturbing to our family, really, because we learned that they took samples of many of Rachel's organs during the autopsy, and have kept them. And they never notified us about this. We didn't know that this had happened, so they're still here. Now we have to figure out how to bring that part of Rachel's remains back to the United States. You know, it's very disturbing, and particularly so, I think, because there are a lot of questions about Professor Hiss, and I don't know all about his history and so forth, but I know there have been questions raised by many other people about his behaviors and how he's handled these things. So of course, when we hear this about Rachel, it's disturbing to us as a family, not knowing if we can believe what we're being told.
What would you see as justice for Rachel?
Oh, that's such a big question now. I think, again, with the lawsuit, for us, you know, it's a civil lawsuit. So if we go through this process and the court determines that the Israeli government, the Israeli military was responsible, then there will be a time when we'll get to talk, I understand, about our loss, what we've lost. And there will be some kind of then damages determined. And in a case like this, mostly that's about money. But for us, this isn't about money. It's always, for 7 years, we've tried every way that we could to get the truth and to have people look at what happened here, to look at what's happening in Gaza. There were 2 other internationals killed on that border. There are many Gazans that have been killed on that border, and we want people to look at it and to see what's happening. And we also, I think justice would be justice would be for the eyes of the world to open up and to know the people of Gaza as we've come to know them, and to give life to the people there. And for the military, for this military, and even for our own militaries, to operate with much, if they have to be in these places, to operate with much more care than they do. I guess it would be for each soldier think that maybe Rachel's story would help each of them to just stop and think a bit more carefully before they take actions against human beings.
I was just going to say, shortly after Rachel was killed, just a few weeks after Rachel was killed, a Jewish woman that became a friend of ours in Seattle, she gave me a book by Desmond Tutu, and I started to read about the Truth and Reconciliation program that went on with Nelson Mandela in South Africa. And that teaches that you first have to learn what went on. You have to learn the truth about what goes on, and then each party has to accept their role in that. And then he says you have to forgive. And I need to go slowly over the part. It's not okay. It'll never be okay in that sense. But maybe forgiving is understanding what a person can do and finding somehow to love them anyhow, because we've all done wrong things. We have no ability to go through that process on our own. This lawsuit may come a little closer to the first step of finding out what happened, but only, if the bulldozer driver wanted to come forward, and we can be found. And sometimes people ask me, well, what do you want to have happen to the bulldozer driver? It does me no good. I don't know if he has children, but if his children grow up without a father in the house, that does me no good. I sometimes say what I'd like to do is hug him, but I would have to travel a long ways in my heart, and he would have to do something I have no idea what he wants to do for that to happen. But that's a sort of justice that we have to stop the hurting, stop hurting each other. And that's what we'd like to have happen out of this.
That's the point I wanted to say. I read some of Rachel's emails to you, and I remember in one of her emails she said that she was scared and she was disappointed, and that she has begun to question the fundamental value of the good nature of human beings. And this sentence really affected me, because that's the thing that's happening nowadays in the world. That's the thing we feel. That I'm a person who does not believe and refuse to believe that man is wolf to man, but the daily life kinds of proves the opposite. So And she continues to say that this is not the world that she wanted to live in, and this is not the world that people in Gaza wanted to live in, and it's not the world that you wanted her to live in when you decided to get her to this world. So, and that kind of I think, from my point of view, that it has to be there should be a way of trying to maintain this picture of the good nature of human beings, for the world to wake up and see it and start to work on maintaining this picture. Because if a person grows up not believing in the good nature of human beings, then where would the world go to? If I know that this person in front of me is nothing and I'm just to survive I have to hurt him, then where does that lead us to? And I think the moment the world realizes the importance of the war culture that's being nurtured here in this part of the world, I think that's a starting point for Rachel to gain justice in one way or another. Because
what's
if I could respond to that for a moment. Since Rachel was killed, really starting at her memorial service, I've gotten a lot of very good spiritual advice from Muslims. But this advice came from a Muslim attorney, and I generally don't think going to an attorney for spiritual advice is the right place. But he turned to me one night and he said, Craig, the question is not why do bad things happen to good people. The question is, what do good people do when bad things happen? And that goes right back to, I think, what I take, from the day of Rachel's memorial service and an imam talking to us about the good deeds and realizing he wasn't talking about Rachel, he was talking about me. What have I done? What am I going to do? And I don't know why it's so hard, but I do know that what we can control is ourselves, and we just have to continue to work for making things better and think about those children and pushing away all this destruction, all this threat, and allowing them to have their childhood and the rest of their lives.
I think the guys are getting tired.
I know they are.
Because everyone hears about Rachel. When I heard the story, it has an effect on everyone that hears the story. But we know Rachel for us is she's a kind of Palestinian hero. Yeah. She's ours.
Yeah.
You know, everyone takes a bit of her, but what is the bit that we don't know? How is she in real? How is she as a person? Was she funny?
Yeah, she's very funny.
How was she?
She was very funny. She would tease from a little girl. She was our child that was in the corner, either drawing or writing and listening. She would participate in family life, but she also would watch it. And of course now we've taken some of her writing as a book, and you can see what she was doing about it. She could have a very quiet sense of humor and tease us or her siblings. And I was thinking of one particular time, somebody called Cindy from the school district where the kids went to school and wanted to know what values Cindy thought should be taught in the schools. And her two older siblings were jumping up and down, yelling things about what ought to be taught, all these values. And Rachel just looked at me and said, "Manners." And she was maybe 4 at the time, So she grew into a tall, thin woman, and she'd come around the corner, usually a little late to meet us. So I think she always lived, as we say now, on Arab time. But she'd come around the corner, and children would be laughing, friends saying hi. And even when we went to Gaza, we'd hear people talk about her and say, "Oh yes, that's the way she would come and meet us in the morning." Still in that way.
I think it's surprising to people sometimes to know that she was the best listener, I think, in our family of all of us. And some of that came from training because she from the time she was in middle school on, she worked with something called the crisis clinic in our community. At first she would take phone calls from teenagers who were having problems, and she went to an office and they took calls, and she would take these calls, but then she stayed with that. Even during college, she worked for the crisis clinic and took calls from adults listening. So she was trained in being a good listener, but she also just intuitively, I think, was. Because there's a lot of her writing and her words are out there. They're in a play. We saw the play in Arabic, again, some of it recently in Haifa. But I think when people hear that, they think that here was this kind of loud, outspoken person, and she had a lot to say, but she was also, it was all very internal. There was a lot of thinking going on all of the time, which you can see in her writing and in the emails and in her journals. So a lot of it wasn't necessarily spoken, it was her thinking. And she was a very good thinker. She was a very thoughtful, very intelligent, and also very open, I think, to all kinds of people. She worked with the mentally ill in Olympia as part-time. She just was able to make very personal connections with people, and she was our youngest child. In some ways, I sometimes say I lost my ally in the family because I think personality-wise, Craig and our other two kids are a little bit more alike, and Rachel and I are a little bit more alike. And so she used to, in our family, if we would be having a big discussion, which we often did about many things, if she thought people weren't quite paying attention to what I had to say or something, I would feel her arms slip around my waist. And there was just that bit of moral support, that she brought to me. And I remember a lot. And when we hadn't seen each other for a while, I remember when I came back from North Carolina to Olympia and was in the house, and she walked into the house, and she just, we just held each other and didn't say a word, but just held each other for minutes, And so I feel like she still embraces me in that way. Yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you for your work.
And we'll
Yeah.
watch it all
Yeah,
as soon as
yeah.
we have a bit of time here now. We'll be going
We'll
back.
link to it on the
I
foundation
posted
site.
because they covered the inauguration in Ramallah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
because I was
yeah.
supposed to be there, but I got stuck in the stuff that was happening in Jerusalem
Yeah.
on that day.
Yeah.
I couldn't make it, but we have it. It's already on YouTube.
Oh, good.
I posted it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I posted it on the Facebook group for
Oh,
Rachel.
thank
Oh,
you.
great. Thank you. Thank
So
you.
I'll keep posting, and I'll also post this one, so you can also have it, and maybe you can also put it on the website.
That would
Yeah,
be
that'd
great.
be great.